Hello there, Posing with Alcohol here, also known as Alice Griffiths in my other realms of my name or something. And I'm joining you from London, and today I'm joined with an incredible guest, and I would like to introduce you to the wonderful Matthew from Burn Valley. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so my name's Matthew
I'll
Abbey.
just drink in the background.
Oh, yeah, perfect. I'll do the same. So, name's Matthew Abbey, winemaker at Burn Valley Vineyard up in Norfolk. Been the winemaker there since 2019, but actually learned my trade in New Zealand. So, lived over there for 12
You
years.
don't have a New Zealand accent though.
Unfortunately, I've been back 5 years, so I've kind of lost the twang.
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to listen intently now for an accent to creep in.
It's the odd word, so like I might say yes or like
Yes.
yeah, so the odd twang kind of comes in, but
It's gone.
It's gone now because I've been back so long. So,
wonderful.
but yeah, I lived over there for 12 years, mostly in Otago, so Queenstown about 10 years.
Nice, lovely.
Also stints in Hawke's Bay and Marlborough.
Wonderful.
So kind of got to experience other parts of the country.
Yeah.
But that's basically where I learned all my winemaking and all my viticulture skills. So,
Brilliant, wonderful. And what brought you over to Norfolk?
So I'm originally from the area. So I was born
Okay.
in Cambridge, but lived in Norfolk since the age of about 3 years old. Family is still all there, and literally came back to visit them in 2019 and heard about Burn Valley Vineyard and the Robinson family. Kind of dropped them an email, said, look, I'm back for a few months. Do you want any help in your vineyard? I've done this, obviously, in New Zealand. And they're like, yeah, that sounds perfect. Love to have your help for a couple of days. Met up with Laura, the owner, and we kind of looked at each other and like, oh, we know each other. Oh, we went to high school together at Wells next to sea.
No.
And also with her brother Jack, and then Sam, and obviously knew the parents as well. So all kind of fell into place, and did the first vintage in 2019. So Laura kept me there for basically a 6-month contract, and I had planned to go back to New Zealand. So I went back to Hawke's Bay in 2020, but before I left, Laura offered me a job to come back to, and literally, obviously COVID hit, as we all remember, and I could have stayed in New Zealand, but I had the job, so I came back here. So I've been the winemaker at Burn Valley since kind of 2019, but more permanently since 2020.
Oh, fantastic. And this is what I love about English wine, is that all these stories tend to be these little stories, like
Yes.
connections of like, oh, someone from my past, or I wandered along one day and found some vines, and then I had a job.
Yeah.
Or I just was looking online and saw it and so forth. And that's what I love about English wine, is it tends to be these little lovely connections that lead to wonderful jobs and wonderful opportunities.
Certainly, and there's a lot of Kiwis here as well. It's kind of obviously the Commonwealth connection helps
Yes.
because obviously we're struggling to get people from Europe, obviously after Brexit. But there are a lot of New Zealanders here, a lot of Australians here. But it's obviously because New Zealand has now got to sit at the table, but they're still young in regards to their kind of winemaking history. But if we kind of follow the same model, I think the UK could go a lot of places, and having that expertise here, I think it's just going to kind of push us to that next level.
Yeah.
And it can only benefit the UK wine industry as a whole, having expertise from around the world.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a kind of huge Kiwi and Aussie presence here, which is brilliant.
There is. I mean, the two places I think that we see such a presence in the UK is South Africa.
Yep.
I think there's so many sort of like South African winemakers, particularly coming over here, very interested in it. And also, as well as you say, is New Zealand. Like so many, and again, lots of people, for example, who are studying at Plumpton, I find as well, will disappear off to New Zealand and then come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I looked at studying because I'm self-taught, so I just learned on the job from winemakers. So John Forrest in Marlborough, Dave Napstein, down in Otago, lots of Grant Taylor, Sean Brennan, a bit of Nadine from Peregrine, kind of John at Chard Farm, Christopher Keys at Gibston Valley. So I learned off some of the kind of the pioneers there.
Yeah.
Hawke's Bay, I worked at a winery called Cellini. It's a bit of a kind of bigger production, but I've worked mostly boutique.
Okay.
So it's kind of nice to see the opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, literally, I worked 12-hour days, 6 days or 7 days a week for a month. Lost about 10 kilo a month, a good weight loss program. Did the night shift, 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. Loved it. We had 2 presses of 30 ton and 1 press of 25 ton.
Wow.
So literally, I'd do probably 2 or 3 presses of 30 ton each, and then one or two 25. So I'd do that in one night. Yeah, at Burn Valley, I'd probably do 75 ton on the whole harvest.
Oh wow.
So I'd
So
press
it's
more
completely,
grapes, completely opposite end of the scale.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it's then more like machine made, but it's obviously there's still skill and art involved in
Yes.
it. But when you're kind of boutique and working with smaller parcels, you're a little bit more hands-on, but also kind of standoffish,
Absolutely,
more minimalistic
yeah.
intervention winemaking, which is kind of how I was taught to be. So it's very old school. Obviously, learning from people who learnt themselves just by working on the job, you pick up different kind of techniques, but it's also just kind of applying New World techniques, because obviously New Zealand is still a New World country for its
Yeah.
wine, in a New World country, but using quirky varieties like we have from Germany, like Solaris and Bacchus and
I'm
Schomburg.
going to stop you there because I'm
Yeah.
just going to go back to that, and I'm just going to Can you tell people a little bit about Burn Valley, where it's located, and also what sort of grape varieties and so forth they grow?
So we're based near Burnham Market,
Lovely.
as most people tend to know. Burnham Market, quite famous, but also obviously Holcombe Estates just down the road. So Burn Valley was planted in 2016, obviously by the Robinson family, but we got a team from Germany to do it for us.
Okay.
So we've got 17,000 vines over 12 acre, about 4 hectare. A bit of a mixture. So whites, we've got Bacchus, we've got Solaris, and Schomburger. We've then got a little bit of Savoy Blanc, which you can use for still sparkling.
Yeah.
Then we've got still and sparkling Chardonnay, and then we've got reds. We've got early Pinot. Some people call it Pinot Noir Precose. We've also got Rondo and Regent, so 2 Germanic reds as well, and then we've got sparkling Pinot Noir.
So it's very interesting. They have gone down that more traditional Germanic route. Obviously, you've got the Chardonnays, you've got your traditional Champagne varieties there as well. But they have kept with those sort of like, 1970s sort of like, sort of grape varieties. Is there any particular reason behind that, or?
Mostly climate based.
Yeah.
So when you look at obviously the southeast is more Champagne in its climate, so which is where you
Yes.
get more of your sparklings, whereas East Anglia is typically more Germanic, so slightly cooler. Norfolk is officially the driest county in the UK. The last couple of summers we're probably to tear away from that because it's been quite wet. But overall we are quite dry. But we are a touch cooler. So you're only looking probably 2 or 3 degrees, but over the course of actually the whole kind of growing season or ripening season does make quite a difference between kind of producing, say, sparkling or champagne method compared to obviously doing stills. So a few more vineyards are kind of experimenting with things like Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc. We're going to look at doing that in Norfolk when we put our second vineyard in. So we're going to go a little bit obscure with some other varieties as well, just to kind of push the boundaries. We obviously know that the planet's warming, which is helping the UK wine industry. But it's kind of making sure you plant the right things, and definitely staying more still focused. And it's using those Germanic varieties. I mean, Solaris has only been around since the 1970s.
Yes, and
So
Solaris is what I want to talk about. I love Solaris. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest Bacchus fan.
Yeah.
But I genuinely, I love Solaris. I think it's such a clever grape. I think it does so well in the UK. No, I genuinely love Solaris. I think Solaris is one of those grape varieties that does so well in the UK. And I also think as well that it has some of the attributes of Bacchus that we love.
True, yeah.
There are those sort of like, a little bit of floral aromatics and stuff going through, but it has that lovely fresh and crisp acidity.
Yeah.
But also as well, I think it's a little bit of a housewife's tipple that we need to lean into more, because it can have a little bit of a sweet edge to it.
Can do, yeah.
And it pairs so perfectly with a lot of British cuisine,
Yep.
particularly down by the coast and so forth. I love particularly Welsh Solarises,
Yep.
and I think Norfolk may be in those same sort of realms with the climate.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I think it's such a great pairing with seafood that it just goes so well, like prawns, because again there's a little tiny sweet edge to it. It's not sweet wine, it's a more kind of like aromatic sort of sweetness to it.
Yep.
That you kind of get that lovely fresh crisp acidity that cuts through with like seafood, like mussels in a creamy sauce, or as I said, prawns, like those sort of like sweetened sort of like prawns and stuff. So I think there's a really great marketing opportunity for Solaris as well, because it hasn't got that overwhelming floral sort of aromatics to it that you get with Bacchus.
Yeah, and I think because it's a lot of people are putting in because it's a peewee, so it's
Yes.
a disease-resistant variety,
Yeah.
which kind of works in our climate. Yes, you still have to spray for it. It's not
Can
completely.
you tell us what a peewee is?
So a peewee is these herald from these
What
herald
does
from,
peewee stand for?
Oh God, I haven't actually looked that up. I just refer to them as peewees.
I
haven't-
can't say it. I do know what it is, but I can't say it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
German
it's a bit of a
term.
tongue twister.
They need to come up with another term for it.
Yeah, but they never do. The
No,
Germans are
no.
not very good at naming things.
I'll make it flash across the bottom when it is.
Most people are going to go. We'll just stick with peewee.
We'll just stick with peewee, yeah.
But basically, the disease-resistant hybrids or
Yes.
cross-pollinations. Solaris is probably the most well-known.
Yeah.
Like Rondo sort of fits in the peewee bracket, but there's a few others that have been planted, like Divico. There's Savagnac. There's
Cabernet Noir.
well, I have this argument. So in Europe, they have to call it Cabernet Noir.
Yes.
We can call it Cabernet Noir
Okay,
because we're not
gotcha.
part of the EU anymore.
Ah.
So people are kind of torn with what to call it.
I do like Cabernet, though. I think it's a great name for a wine, Cabernet Noir.
Yeah, I don't know. From being old school, I prefer Cabernet because it's a
Okay.
little bit easier to market.
Okay.
If you call it Cabernet, people are going to be, what on earth is that? Where at least if it's Cabernet,
It's a cool bar.
true. But it's hard enough to kind of market English wine
It is,
anyway.
it
So it's
is,
kind
yeah.
of coming up with these funky names. But Cabernet Noir, it literally is Cabernet Sauvignon crossed with something we don't know because the guy in, I think it was Austria who invented it, hasn't
Yeah.
told anybody.
Trade secrets.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is what kind of the Austrians and Swiss are doing at the moment. They're doing these peewees with German nurseries, and They're planning a lot of them in France. So actually, Tesco have bought one. Called Florian.
Yes, I was reading about this. This is really interesting. And I'm actually doing my diploma and I have to do a paper on peewees.
Yeah.
So I will have to learn what peewee
Yeah.
actually stands for.
So-
say it out loud.
Probably in the UK, one of the main guys who's pushing it is Duncan McNeil.
Yes.
He's pushing the peewees. There's also Sam Barnes, who's more East Anglian based. He does some peewees.
Yeah.
But certainly Duncan McNeil is probably the main viticulturist who's kind of pushing them. There will be more planted. I mean, Solaris is probably the most well known.
Yeah.
I mean, Scandinavia have got a lot of it. So Denmark, Finland, Sweden. Canada are putting quite a bit in as well, I think. Germany, they typically make dessert wine from it because it ripens really well, but again, retains its acidity. So it's quite a versatile grape that you can make many styles with, and that's why a lot of people
So
like.
going on that, we've got Solaris.
Yeah.
Let's get a couple of bottles. Let's have a look. So we've got, first of all, you've got two Solaris. No, you've got three.
We've got three Solarises.
Three Solarises.
Yeah.
So first of all, so this is the more classic.
So more of the estate. So,
So this is the 2023.
yeah. Quite different to how I normally make this. So this is 100% stainless steel fermented
Lovely.
and aged. I normally do like to do quite a bit of batonnage or lees stirring.
Yes.
But again, it kind of comes back to the year. So in 2022, I did actually 7 months of batonnage and lees stirring.
Oh, wow.
And it just kind of gave more palate depth, more weight, more structure.
Yeah.
Also kind of brought that acidity a little bit in, so kind of give it a bit more texture and kind of just soften things out. And again, it came from a hotter year, whereas in 23, cooler vintage, so more challenging, a little bit more lighter in the fruit. So
Yeah.
this only had 2 months on its
2023
lips.
was an odd harvest as well because although it was a very big harvest, it was quite low acidities.
Yeah, well, it depends where you were.
Okay, regional.
So,
I like regional.
Very regional.
terms.
So, for example, in North Norfolk, our acidity levels were fine.
Yeah.
But if you were in Suffolk or Essex, they dropped.
Yeah.
And it wasn't due to, we didn't actually have that much rain kind of in the tail end of the season.
Yeah.
For some reason, the acid was just dropping further south. Yet in Norfolk, we were fine.
Yeah, because a lot of people said, "Oh, it's going to be a sparkling year," but actually, it wasn't that grape sparkling either because those acidities weren't there. The
They were
sugars
too low.
weren't there in a lot as well,
No.
but the acidity was not there either. But we shall see
Yeah.
what the winemakers can do with it. But you were fine. You had.
We
you
were
had that.
absolutely fine. I mean, this we do buy a little bit of fruit in. So this came from a vineyard in Essex.
nice.
So again, a little bit more ripeness in the fruit compared to what we had. But it just kind of came down to his acid levels were dropping, and he wanted to get it picked. The sugars were absolutely fine, but because of the lighter fruit spectrum, because we didn't have the heat to get that fruit flavour in there. If I'd have done batonnage or lees stirring, it would have overpowered the wine.
Yes, yeah.
So it's a slightly kind of more lighter fruit. It's a little bit of texture, but it's a more kind of aromatic. So there's a little bit of that kind of savvy green vegetal aromatics coming through, which you do get with a variety, but like I say, not as much as what you get with Bacchus.
Yeah.
So it's different to how I normally make it, and it just comes down to vintage variation. So it's kind
Absolutely.
of, again, minimalistic intervention winemaking where I'm just going, actually, no, the fruit's telling
And
me
do you find that is that something that you plan to do? Is that you want to work with the fruit every year? You're not looking for a particular style. You're working with what the fruit has given you in the vintage.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you're going to get vintage variation because we're called plant.
Yes.
But that's what makes certainly my job more fun and more actually for a customer kind of experience, because I don't want to make the same style every year because then it just becomes the norm. I'd rather
Absolutely.
do something a bit left field, and there's quite a few winemakers who are, and it makes you kind of stand out amongst the crowd.
Yeah.
But then also people go, oh, well, actually you're doing a different style to what someone else is doing down the road. So it's kind of just telling you what the vintage is doing, what the fruit's telling you to do, but also kind of just going with the flow, really.
Yeah. But minimal intervention, as
But
you
minimal
said.
intervention,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is your classic Solaris.
Yeah,
What
so-
else?
So,
What's in the magic there?
so we then do our reserve.
Okay. So what's the difference between these two?
So obviously the estate white label, as we call it, is 100%
Yeah.
say stainless steel fermentation aging.
Yeah.
Normally batonnage, but not on the 23.
Yeah.
The reserve or the black label is basically 100% barrel fermented and barrel aged for around about 9 months. Also, it's aged on its lees, but no malolactic. No lees stirring. But I do malolactic 100%.
Okay. So it does go. So this goes through mallow.
That goes
on
through
this.
mallow.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously the estate doesn't, so it's only done in the barrel.
So what would mallow do to it for people who are not aware of what mallow does?
So
It's
you go
obviously
from-
conversions.
Yeah, so it's basically a bacterial kind of enzyme you add into. So it's basically you go from sharper malic acid, which you find in like a citrus fruit, to
Yeah.
softer lactic acid, which is what you find in dairy.
So it will make it more perhaps potentially buttery or creamy, sort of like texture to the wine.
Yeah. So we only really associate that with things like Chardonnay.
Yes.
You don't tend to do it on things like Sauvignon Blanc because you want to retain that
Yeah.
acidity and keep that crisp. Whereas obviously with things like Chardonnay, you often want to have that kind of characteristic in with there. So
Yeah.
pretty much all reds go through malolactic.
Yeah.
Most will instigate that fermentation. You can kind of do it at different stages. So you can do it alongside your primary fermentation. You can do it sequential, which is just after primary ferment, or I kind of tweak it. Sometimes I actually do it in the spring. So obviously after harvesting in, say, October, wine sits in barrel for the winter, and then when you get the warmth of kind of May, June, I actually instigate the malolactic then.
Okay.
It's kind of a more traditional way, a natural way of using the heat
Yes.
to allow the mallow to go through, compared to, saying, putting heaters under there.
Yeah.
Or using the primary ferment heat
Okay.
to do that. So there's a few kind of different techniques.
What
you
sort
can
of
do
yeast
with-
do you use? Do you use indigenous or do you use
No, I use cultured.
cultured yeast? Do you have a favourite yeast?
I use.
I like
There's
yeast.
so many. I use Lafort for all my
Okay.
yeasts and all my nutrients. I love what they do in their products. Obviously, there are a couple of others out there, but Lafort, I think you just get the nice kind of consistency. I tend to use the same yeast year on year.
Okay.
For obviously different yeast for different wines, but the same yeast for all the same wines. So
Okay.
typically with the Solaris Reserve, I use a Burgundian yeast to try and
Nice,
get that
lovely.
kind of Chardonnay influence. So
Okay, so you're going more like the Chablis, sort of like, with that creaminess around it and with the mallow and but
So basically, that was my tribute to Burgundy and Chardonnay,
Okay.
using Solaris because I couldn't ripen Chardonnay. So it's
Okay.
kind of like a Burgundy tribute. It's been our signature wine. It's not made every year.
No.
And the 22's probably been one of the best vintages, I think, to date. And it's just been phenomenal. I didn't make it last year again
Yeah.
because of the season. Hopefully this year, but again, I made
This
enough
is
in
fantastic
22.
though to have like two different wines. They are so different,
Yeah,
and
completely.
to do side by side tastings. And again, if you're just entering into English wine, this may be your first choice. And
Yeah.
if you're a bit more of a connoisseur, you're like, oh, I might
Yeah.
add to that one. But what else could we add to it?
So,
Ta-da!
ta-da, I also make a late harvest.
Oh,
Solaris.
wowza!
So typically this is what they do with Solaris in Germany.
Yes.
Again, because it ripens really, really well, it's the ability to do that, and obviously because Germany's hotter than us, they actually do typically make dessert wine from it.
Yes.
Again, outside of kind of doing that in Germany, we're the main kind of players with Solaris, say, Scandinavia, Denmark, and kind of Finland, Sweden are planting quite a lot of it, especially Denmark. But to make a dessert wine, because there's not many in the UK, and I think
No.
it's one of the varieties you can make dessert wine from, purely because it gets the really good sugar on. So it's typically picked about normally 3 or 4 weeks after the other two Solarises.
Okay, so it has to be a healthy crop year because you don't want to
Yeah.
get something like botrytis coming in, unhealthy botrytis, obviously.
Yeah, we spray for botrytis.
Yeah.
We don't really have the conditions in the UK to actually allow it to grow to make a proper dessert wine.
Yeah,
we're
to do
just
noble
we're too
rot or
wet, we're
anything,
too
no,
humid.
no.
So typically you do get botrytis, but we spray for it, as most
Yeah.
people will do, because you don't want to.
But your aim here is to keep this on the vines as long as possible, as healthy as possible, to get more sugar basically into the grape
Yeah.
and to get more reduction so that you get more concentrated sugar.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's still kind of pushing in that kind of entry level in regards to kind of sugar levels for a dessert wine. So it's 112 grams residual sugar per litre. Obviously the two other whites are bone dry. So
Yeah.
it's kind of only just reaching that kind of echelon. But again, it's all about the balance of acidity. If you go too sweet, you lose the acidity just to kind
Yeah.
of keep it fresh. Obviously, if you go the other way, people might find it a little bit too sharp, even
Yeah.
though it's got that hint of sweetness. So you get that lovely kind of hint of sweetness on the tip of the tongue.
Yeah.
But then you get the lovely kind of dried peaches, apricots, nectarines.
So you've got
and then you get the
fruit,
acidity.
and again, I find that these wines, because they're not what you'd expect dessert wine, they're not like sickly sweet, kind of like runny honey sort of like wines. They are thinner.
Yeah.
So they're for me, they're perfect for cheeses, like
Oh,
really great
totally.
cheese board, lighter end of desserts. You don't want to like, they're not chocolate desserts or anything like that. It's a very much sort of like, fruity sort of like dessert. They pair perfectly
Yeah.
well with, and also as well, I love them with pate. Like
Oh, yeah,
with
yeah.
chicken liver parfait and things like
Yeah.
that. I think they're sensational, but they're not your typical dessert wines. You shouldn't be expecting it to be sickly sweet and kind of like sticky. It's yeah.
It's again because we don't get the conditions for the
No.
noble rot.
And that's
so
made
to
by
have-
stop fermentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So typically I use a combination of basically setting the tank to as low a temperature as I possibly can during fermentation, also adding a bit of sulfur to stop the yeast as well.
Yeah.
So a bit of a combination. It's just if I add too much yeast, too much sulfur,
Yeah.
it's just the risk of there being too much kind of retained left over. So it's a
Absolutely.
combination of temperature and sulfur to stop the ferment.
Yeah.
So
And you aim to stop at what sort of alcohol level?
8 to 8.5.
So you can drink the
So-
whole bottle.
You can,
Yeah.
I
I'm
mean, honestly,
drinking it in one
well,
night.
That's fine. You're not diabetic, guys.
No.
That's fine. Either way.
Okay.
If I'm in trouble,
Matthew's
typically,
going to convince me why I should like Bacchus.
So, it is our national grape.
Yeah. On national grape. Is that legal? Do we have
Well,
to?
it's kind of the grape that we've made sort of our own. It's obviously
Yeah,
not
we
from
stole
the UK.
it.
We stole it from
We
Germany.
stole it from Germany. Yeah.
But Obviously, the reason why people like it is
It's
because
a Marmite grape, because I used to work in a vineyard and I'd have people come in and they would queue up for Bacchus.
yeah,
They loved it.
Yeah.
Whereas like other people were like, I can't have that near me.
yeah. I think the reason why people like it is because, you know, if you go out, most people go, oh, have you got Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio?
Yes.
It's the kind of two whites we always kind of revert back to in the UK. And that's where we often do the comparison with Bacchus. You know,
Yeah.
people will say, oh, it's very Sauvignon Blanc like because of the aromatics. You get the gooseberry, you get the elderflower.
Yes.
There's kind of green herbaceous notes that we associate with things like Pinot Grigio and Sauvignon Blanc. There's no parentage of either. It's Riesling and Müller-Thurgau.
Yeah.
So when people kind of mark it as England's answer to Sauvignon Blanc, I get that because of the comparison.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you start doing that, people think about price comparisons. And, you know, the UK wine market is tricky at the best of times because obviously economy of scale, you know, we're still very, very small compared to what our European counterparts
Absolutely.
are producing. But it's a grape that it loves our climate. It is, you know, a lovely dry aromatic variety that we can grow really, really well. It's a lovely wine for summer, seafood, shellfish, kind of all occasions.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that it does get compared to other varieties because of
yeah.
you get the price comparison. But every winemaker does a different Bacchus. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
for example, up in Norfolk, probably the most well-known was Winbury Vineyard and Lee, when he won his big award of decanter in 2017, I think, for his 2015 Bacchus. You know, to win the best expression of a single variety wine globally at decanter.
Yeah.
You know, that's huge. When you do that with a variety that no one knows, it puts it on the map and it's kind of taken it to the next level. And you always need a pioneer to do that. And certainly, you know, how I make my Bacchus is different to how Lee does at Winbury, to how, say, Ben does at Flint.
Yeah.
So every vineyard does a slightly different take on it. And again, you're going to get different kind of fruit ripeness.
I think that's one of my things about Bacchus is when I find it repetitive, when I find that someone's just like, we want to make New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, so we use the same yeasts that every New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc has in it because we're trying to get tropical, we're trying to get like, you know, we're trying to, and then a lot of the time I just find I'm drinking the same wine on repeat. And my favourite Bacchuses are either ones that are indigenous or so forth, or have been really messed with on oak and stuff.
So I do two styles, just to kind of, so I do a Bacchus and a Bacchus Fume. So
Bacchus Fume. There you go. You see, Bacchus Fume.
Normally goes in barrel for about kind of 6 months. So I make the two styles just to kind of show again the versatility of the variety and what you can do with it. And again, you get kind of different fruit spectrum. So typically the normal Bacchus is picked a bit earlier. You get a little bit more aromatic profile.
Lovely.
Then the Fume is picked later on, so less of the aromatics, more fruit.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of getting that oak merged with the fruit with a touch of the aromatic profile.
Yeah.
So, but for example, with the 23, that's bone dry.
Yeah.
So 0 grams of RS. The 22 vintage was off dry.
Oh right, okay.
So I had a little bit of RS around about kind of 12 grams. So for me, again, it kind of shows the versatility, but again, it's kind of going along with what the vintage is telling me to do.
Yeah.
More fruit in 22. Actually, okay, let's do a bit of RS. And it actually stopped there. The ferment stopped with that residual sugar. So the yeast were like, no, we're done, we're happy.
Done. This is where we want to be.
Yeah. People loved it.
Yeah, and this is what I mean is that like some people literally, you know, it's the same. When you have a rosé, I find a lot of time people are like, oh, I don't want a sweet rosé, but when it comes to Bacchus, people sometimes like it off dry or like, you know.
British palate's still slightly sweeter.
Yeah. Although they all lie and say they don't want a off dry rosé, but they all drink it at home really well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we still have that slightly sweeter palate compared to.
There's one other thing about Bacchus as well. I won't prune Bacchus. It's
Why?
hard wood. It hurts my hands. I literally.
You don't do it manual.
Yeah,
really?
no, I won't.
Not
I won't prune Bacchus with manual
Well, if you want
secateurs.
to come prune Norfolk, I'll give you my as long as you don't.
No, I'll cut my fingers off.
Well, you can't.
So
I'll
what
give you.
flavour profile do you aim for with your Bacchus? Is it much more towards the tropical end, or is it you want some of the meaty?
Bit of both. So slight kind of the vegetal characteristics you get on the nose, but also kind of a combination of citrus and tropical notes.
Okay.
So a nice kind of merge of both, not to be two-dimensional, so a little bit of complexity in there. It's all about kind of picking. I learned this from John Forrester Margaret. And he was like very particular when he picked his Sauvignon Blanc. So if you picked it quite early, you're very green, you're very vegetal, you're very acidic. You don't have a lot of kind of fruit structure.
Yeah.
Then if you kind of pick a little bit later, you get a little bit more ripeness, still get the aromatic profile, but a touch more fruit coming from the palate. And if you leave it to as late as long as possible, you lose a lot of the aromatics, but you get a lot more fruit texture, so more kind of tropical notes. So it does depend a lot when you pick your Bacchus. And that's kind of getting there.
And so when are you looking at harvest this year at Burn Valley?
So we're probably going to be starting, I reckon, second week in October.
Okay.
So I mean,
So those who are harvesting now,
Yeah.
the Ortegas and the Bacchuses, are they potentially going to have that more sort of green characteristic that you mentioned?
potentially with this year, yeah. And I
Depending
think,
where they are, obviously.
depending where they
regionally.
are. I mean, obviously it's very site specific. I mean, we don't tend to talk about terroir in the UK, but obviously it is very, very
Yeah.
important. And it's just, you know, again, you can pick early. People like it because they want those characteristics. Again, I'll always kind of leave the fruit hanging as long as possible, get as much flavour profile in there. Obviously, get as much natural sugar, so I don't have to chaptalise.
Yeah.
Again, it's going more down that natural route.
Yeah.
I mean, last year I had to chaptalise. I think I added about half a tonne of sugar to all the wines across the board.
Yeah.
Just because the sugar levels
There was
were
a
so
run
low.
on sugar last year. for
There was a
English
shortage on
wine.
sugar, yeah.
There was a shortage of tanks and a shortage of sugar.
Yeah. I mean, we bought another tank this year just
Yeah,
to kind of
just to make,
give us a
yeah.
bit more space. I mean, I had no room last year. I had to put wine into Arlingtons, which
Yeah.
are basically just boxes with liners in them just to have space.
Yeah. I've heard stories of milk tanks being hired
yeah.
in to like, particularly for contract winemakers, to like just make tank space because it was such a large load. But as I said, it wasn't particularly the best crop. I mean, some obviously were incredible, but like some people were struggling with those acidities and the sugar.
And I think it comes after the back of 22, which was like one of the best growing seasons we've ever
Yeah.
had. So it literally was polar opposites.
Yeah.
24 was like supposed to follow 22 as the kind of trend is going with like
Yeah.
18, 20, 22 being hotter years. 24 is kind of bucked the trend and a little bit more like 23, but obviously lower yields. So hopefully we'll get a bit more ripeness in there, which will be the key.
It's looking good so far.
The fruit's clean,
Yeah.
so I can't complain. Lower yields, and it's just a consequence of the last couple
What's
of
your
years.
biggest sort of like issues over in Norfolk with regards to like, you know, vineyard management?
It's got to be just disease pressure.
Disease pressure, like powdery and downy sort of like
Yeah,
situation.
definitely downy is huge. Powdery not so much, but definitely downy. We don't kind of spray any pesticides, so you know I want wildlife in the vineyard. So we've always got earwigs and spiders and ladybirds, ladybugs. We've had birds nesting in the canopy.
Oh, lovely.
We've got deer going through the vineyard. We've got partridges in there.
It's one of the things as well, though, that we kind of go straight to powdery and downy, but there is a big issue with a lot of like mammals, particularly like in vineyards, and birds as well.
Hares especially.
Wasps as well. Wasps, birds, deer, badgers.
Yeah, I haven't seen any kind of badger damage yet. I mean, deers will knock off the young shoots if there's no kind of... We've got grass in the vineyard, so most things will actually kind of eat the grass before they tend to look at going for the young shoots. We've got munkjacks, so they don't seem to be too fussed about eating the young shoots. In fact, at the moment, touch wood. Touch wood. Hares are damaging on young vines because if there's not enough food, they'll chew them and they'll snap.
So what's your vine age then? How old are your vines there?
So planted 2016.
Okay,
so
they're
still young.
They're still young, but they've got a width to them. But
I mean most are probably about that thick. Yeah, some a bit bigger. Again, it's variety specific, but they're good kind of yield now. So if the hare does decide to nibble, they're probably strong enough to withstand it. I mean, one thing that a lot of agronomists are worried about is more things like trunk disease, and especially if you're getting these kind of wetter, milder winters, there's more risk, especially when you're pruning. If you do large cuts and you don't treat them, there's more risk of trunk disease, and that's just going to cause problems down the line, which again you'd have to replant. So there are diseases we have to worry about. It's just part and parcel with obviously our changing climate. You know, it's harder to predict the seasons and what we're getting. You know, we're getting these dry spouts, we're getting obviously then these floods. I mean, you only have to look what happened the last couple of days in London. It's just been
So your ethos is really minimalist sort of winemaking and respecting the vines as well. So pruning, keeping an eye out for wounds and so forth, and making sure that you are respecting the vines so that they grow as healthy as possible. So do you do a lot of sort of vineyard management, like green harvesting and leaf stripping and things like that as well?
Yeah, all done by hand. So literally bud rubbing, shoot thinning, leaf plucking, fruit thinning, literally all done by hand.
Wowza.
So,
and how big's your team?
So literally, so there's Laura, the owner. We do have a catering side of the business, so her partner Steve is the chef. So they've got Burn Valley Catering, we've got Burn Valley Vineyard, and then there's literally myself, so I'm the winemaker. Then we've got Dave, who's our cellar door manager, and he helps in the vineyard, occasionally helps me in the winery. And then we've got Alex and Matt, so they're mainly vineyard. Alex does a little bit on kind of tastings as well, and that's literally it. And then I've got my friend Kerry joining me from New Zealand for harvest this year.
Oh, wonderful, lovely. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, so she works for a small vineyard called Burn Cottage.
Nice,
so
lovely.
Burn Valley, so it's kind of working both.
What's your average day length over harvest? Because I think a lot of people don't realise that how hard winemakers in the UK actually have to work over harvest?
Yeah, obviously it depends on the size of the harvest. I mean, we do around about 75 tonne maximum. As I kind of mentioned with Cellini, I was doing 12-hour days, 7 days a week for a month. That's kind of on the bigger end of the spectrum. I'd probably do 10, 12-hour days, maybe like 5 days a week.
Okay.
And then there's kind of a couple of days where I just come in to do the analysis. So it's just kind of a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the afternoon. It obviously does depend when the fruit's coming in.
Yeah, and you also have to be there, because if it's ready, it's ready.
Yeah.
And then you've obviously, once you've picked from the day, you've then got to then put it in the press.
Yeah.
So it's a long day, because it's a lot of sort of like labour of love as well, to kind of get everything out and onto the press so that it's ready for the winemaking the next day.
So I can do about 3 presses a day.
Okay.
So we've got a 3 tonne press. So we can do it. It's long hours, and it's probably for about 6 weeks from when you kind of start to the last kind of ferment finishing. But
then it's a winter of winemaking, and it's a little bit more chill.
Yeah, but I then start thinking about pruning. So it never stops. But,
yeah. So what else have you bought for me?
So I've got our award-winning Chardonnay 2022.
Who's it award-winning with?
So it's actually picked up 2 gold medals and 3 trophies. So first ever
2 gold medals,
2 gold
3
medals and 3
trophies.
trophies.
My word.
So first ever still Chardonnay we've produced at Burn Valley. So we've got the still and sparkling club, but even because of where we are and obviously the youngness of the vines, it's never ripened, apart from 2022. Didn't make it last year, definitely not going to make it this year, so it might be a one vintage wonder.
Okay.
If it's not good enough for still, then basically the still clone goes in with the sparkling.
Yeah.
But 22, early spring, lovely hot summer, literally left the fruit hanging on the vine as long as possible. We sacrificed half the fruit just to get the ripeness in there.
Okay, so you basically did like a green harvest. So you removed anything that wasn't looking as healthy, so that you could encourage other grapes to grow.
Yeah.
So it's like sacrificing your children so that others can survive.
So pretty much half the yield we sacrificed just to get it in there. So only 11 barrels were produced, but slight difference to the Solaris. So Solaris, say, was 100% barrel fermented, barrel aged for 9 months, full malolactic. This was stainless steel fermented and then aged in oak for 6 months. Only a couple were virgin casks, so brand new. Then the rest were 1 to 3 year old. Partial malolactic, but I didn't instigate that. I could do with the Solaris. It did it by itself in the oak.
Oh wow! Okay.
So more of a natural process. I was still a bit on the fence when it went in, but after the 6 months in barrel, I mean, that's the beauty of using oak. Hungarian oak, I'm going to use French for the first time this year, which I'm really excited about. So it's just kind of that 6 months in barrel just did absolute wonders. And I never expected to do so well. So we entered it into the IEWA, the Independent English Wine Awards, picked up 1 of 5 gold medals given out to still, and picked up the best still wine trophy as well. So over the moon, and John Mobbs, who is one of the judges, did an amazing review on it, and I was ecstatic.
We love John.
Yeah, John, brilliant. Absolutely love John, and obviously great British wine. And we entered into our East Anglian Wine GB, so we do every year. It picked up another gold medal, and also picked up best white wine trophy, or top white wine trophy, which we actually won the year before with our Pinot Gris. So we retained that trophy, and then won East Anglian Wine of the Year, which second time I've won that award. I won it with a Pinot Blanc back in 2020. So it's got a touch of Burgundy about it, but probably more of a safe on New Zealand kind of Tasmanian style of Chardonnay. So it's got a touch of that kind of New World, but with a little bit of kind of essence of Burgundy. A lot of people ask me what wine is my favourite. I don't have children. My wine are my children, so I'm proud of every one I bottle and produce. But probably the one I'm most chuffed with, and probably the most proud because I haven't been able to make it, is probably the Chardonnay.
Fantastic.
And I just don't know when I'm going to make it again.
That's incredible.
And I never expected to do so.
I'm just going to read the back. So
got my
beautiful.
name on it.
Oh, you put your name on it. Beautiful aromas of honeysuckle, vanilla, and tropical fruits, leading to soft, buttery palate with stone fruits and soft texture finish. Incredible. That's fantastic. And what would you pair that with? What would you?
Oh, I mean, definitely. People ask me what would you pair, kind of obviously when we come up to Christmas. I don't even think about Christmas. We've got harvest first, but definitely things like chicken, turkey. I mean, pork.
This would be a Christmas Day wine. This is because it's something special. Christmas Day with your turkey. Pinot Noir for people. Well, actually,
we can do both. Start with Chardonnay and do Pinot. But
there's always someone at the table who's like, I want a little dark me, a little bit of Pinot or Rondo or Regent.
So
let's move across.
Let's move across. But anything kind of seafood, so richer seafood dishes, pasta dishes, anything with a little bit of richness, but things like turkey, chicken. Pork definitely works quite well, but definitely kind of heartier seafood.
Heartier, it's got to have some
that
oomph
richness
to it to cut through with that mallow and that lovely butteriness and deeper sort of fruits. Lovely. So we're on to reds because they make reds as well. Did you know they make reds in the UK? They do.
We do. So we've got 2 reds.
Yeah.
So the reason why we've kind of I do a bit of a mixture. So we do make Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
I can never make enough. So we've got the early Pinot. Some people call it Bacchus,
Yeah.
but obviously the Germans call it Frühburgunder. We just call it Pinot Noir. Sorry, actually,
All right. Hello. We're speaking
so
through.
it's kind of using other varieties like Rondo and Regent. So
Yeah.
we've got 1,000 vines of each. I tend to make a few styles. So we do a summer red called Marsh Red, blend of Rondo Regent, made in the cooler years. It's designed for kind of picnics, barbecues, platters.
Yeah.
You can serve it like the chill. It's only 10% ABV.
Nice.
So all stainless steel. So it's just light, it's fruity, it's
Nice. Is
easy
it quite
going.
crunchy? Because I quite like sort of those sort of red apple-y sort of like crunchy.
Not so much.
Not so much. What
No,
sort of fruits are we getting on it then?
You're getting a little bit of kind of black forest fruits.
Okay.
Touch
But
of
it's got
maybe-
light body to it
But it's
though.
got no body.
Yeah.
But you've got a touch of that kind of blackcurrant leaf on the
Okay.
nose. So it's got that kind
Lovely.
of
little bit of menthol kind of coming
a
through.
touch of that. And it's just kind of making it in the cooler vintages where you don't
Okay.
get that kind of concentration. You still get the richness, but you don't get the kind of oomph with the concentration.
Yeah.
And very light on the tannins. That's the beauty of using things like Rondo.
I'm a big fan of Rondo.
Yeah, 100%.
Hashtag Rondo is massive. Okay.
And I made a single variety Rondo in 21.
Yeah.
It was so Rioja Reserva-esque. People just lapped it up.
Yeah.
And I haven't been able to make it since. So I'm planning to make it again this year.
My favourite Rondos are semi-carbonic.
Oh, nice.
I really
Yeah.
like sort of, I mean, they'll stain your kitchen worktop
Yeah, that's
because
right.
they are
Yeah.
so rich in colour.
Yeah.
But Rondo has got such colour to it.
Yeah.
But I just love the fruit.
Yeah.
It's just pure fruit, and it gives it a little bit more body because there's more oomph with the fruit on it.
Yeah. I thought about doing some carbonic. It's
Yeah.
just having the right conditions to do it. And
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
can either do it in tank or you can do it in like a dough and just seal it. It's just kind of obviously having the fruit ripeness there to do it. So
Yes.
a lot of people do it on Pinot Noir especially. It's renowned in the target to do a lot of carbonic. It's mainly getting that more fruit in there and obviously a lot of the aromatic essence, so it's again more natural.
Yeah.
Definitely works on Rondo. Regent, it's a little bit trickier because you get
Yeah.
a lot more kind of fluctuating berry sizes, so you get a lot of the kind of chicken and hen. You often get a lot of kind of little diddy green berries, and also the stalks don't ripen. So if you do
Okay.
a lot of carbonic, you're going to get
You're going
those
to end up
green,
with too
bitter-
much sort of like,
Yeah.
you know, bitterness and
Yeah,
like,
but
yeah.
Rondo you can certainly do.
Yeah.
But we've got the bigger brand, which is the Chalk Bed Reserve.
Yeah.
So blend of Rondo region again, but from a hotter vintage, so 2022. So going back a year, whereas Marsh Red was made in 23 to 21. So this is only the second edition. The first vintage being 2020. This goes into oak for 12 months.
Brilliant.
So using American oak on Rondo, giving a slightly more brash kind of characteristics, but more sweeter aromatic profile.
And you get sort of vanilla and stuff
A
kind of
lot
coming
of kind of
through.
vanilla, cinnamon
Yeah.
coming through.
So a little bit of spice as
little
well.
bit
So you've
spice,
got a little
yeah.
bit of bramble and spice.
Yeah.
Almost, yeah.
Because Rondo needs that little bit of oomph to it.
Yes.
Whereas Regent goes into Hungarian. It doesn't need that because Regent's a bit more savoury, a bit more earthy. Again, a bit more spice, but it doesn't need the kind of the brash kind of characteristics you get from the American. It needs like the elegance of European oak.
Okay.
So 6 barrels of each in oak for 12 months, and literally we're just kind of a bit of a trial and error with blending because I also had, so basically I had 6 barrels of Rondo, but I had 13 barrels of Regent.
Yeah.
So I basically had a fun afternoon getting samples of each and just doing a few trials. I was tasting and spitting while doing this because I would have probably been fairly drunk afterwards. And literally kind of finding out which 6 barrels will work with the Rondo to make the chalk bed, but also kind of finding 7 barrels that would be basically a standout to make a single variety region.
Okay.
So a bit of basically a barrel selection process. So afterwards I then picked my 7 to make this, so basically my kind of favourite single variety expression, and then the kind of 6 that worked with that, but also which I thought didn't make a single, were blended to make the chalk
Okay.
bed. So it's kind of a bit of fun.
Yes.
Um,
And it should be fun. That's
Oh,
the thing.
totally.
Like, you know, to say this is new. Like, it's a new industry. We should be having fun.
Yeah.
We should be enjoying it. What do you say to people who say, I don't really like English reds?
don't kind of be afraid to take a gamble.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whenever you buy a bottle of wine, it's always a gamble. But we're obviously, we think about varieties that we know, so revert back to things like Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlots, Malbecs, etc. Don't be afraid of things like Rondo and Regent,
No.
because they are fabulous varieties. You don't tend to find them obviously outside of Germany, but they work in our gardens. So the Chalk Bed Reserve is kind of like, a Rioja Reserva S style wine.
Yeah.
It's got the richness, it's got a little bit of spice, it's still quite soft and velvety. Works great with things like steak. So it is definitely a crowd pleaser. Regent's probably a little bit more of a palate kind of sensitive, so because it's got a bit more tannin there, it's got a bit more
Yeah.
grip, more
Perhaps
spice.
more of a food wine?
Definitely more of a food friendly.
Yeah.
So lamb, duck, venison, something a little bit
Okay.
richer, a little bit
Gamey,
gamier.
yeah.
So as we're kind of going into winter, perfect.
Okay,
So
lovely.
if you were having beef for Christmas,
Beef for Christmas.
yeah, chalk bed. If you were having lamb or
Yeah.
duck, Regent.
Regent.
So it's kind of, again, I always associate wine and food because that's, wine and food just goes so well together. There's wine obviously we drink on our own, there's food we have on our own, but when you do the kind of perfect matches, it's triggering every kind of taste bud you got, and you just get a lovely kind of palate sensation, and you just think, oh, I've just found the right combination. So the Regent's a little bit more like Syrah-ish because of the spice, that touch of kind of savouriness as well, but it's got a little bit of kind of elegance to it, even though it's got a bit more tannin. Again, John has just reviewed this Great British Wine, loves it, and literally it's just starting to kind of open up in perfect time for kind of winter. Chalk bed, good to go, but we'll still probably keep for another 3 years quite happily.
Wonderful. So there is some aging potential there as well.
Definitely. I mean, English wines can age. I mean, even Bacchus will keep a couple of Rieslings.
I've got some Bacchus.
So Bacchus will keep as well. If the wine's got balance,
if it's got tannins, if it's got acidity, it's got everything going for it. It should age.
And certainly using oak to kind of push the boundary this year, because the Regent's not going to ripen enough to make a red. So I'm going to actually make a sparkling red with the Regent this year.
Stay tuned for that one. Stay tuned.
I don't know how it's going to go. I make the sparkling base ones. I haven't done a red yet. So we do make sparkling. So we've got a Blanc de Blanc.
We're moving on to sparklings. We're moving on.
Every year we've done slightly differently. So 2018 we did a blend, so classic blend of Chardonnay and Pinot. 2019 we did a Rosé, so Pinot Noir. 2020 we did our first ever Blanc de Blanc, but we haven't released that yet. So I'm going to go like proper vintage on the sleeves as long as possible. Then 21 we did both, so Blanc de Blanc and Rosé. 22 went a little bit left field and made a sparkling from Seyval Blanc.
I love Seyval sparkling. I think aromatic's lovely on it. I think it's a fantastic aperitif. My favourite Seyvals have always got kind of a sort of like cucumbery sort of like freshness to them. So I'm a big fan of Seyval as a entry level sort of sparkling traditional method.
So we're going to do the traditional method. So it's been on these for about a year.
Lovely.
We're probably going to do another 6 months.
You can do it shorter as well with Seyval. I think if you go too far, you don't want to lose those freshness. You want to, if you put too much lees on it, then you're going to just end up with,
So the plan is to go probably another 6 months, but then do zero dosage.
Nice, lovely.
So the two sparklings we have are extra brut, so there's about 5 grams of dosage in them. Wonderful. But we did a few trials the other day, and I'm going to go zero. I love a zero dosage.
I love a zero dosage.
So we're going to go zero because it's just actually keeping that freshness.
As long as you haven't got that sort of sucking lemon sort of like feeling to it, like ultimately I think go that way. So
we're going to do that. We did a trial, so it's got 50 magnums made up, just for a bit of fun.
Magnums, we like magnums.
So we've got a small production, so we've got probably about, I think it's about 1,000 bottles, and then probably about another maybe about 1,500 bottles, and then a few magnums as well.
Brilliant.
Just for a bit.
And what do you look for in a sparkling? What's the Burn Valley sort of style? Is it more autolysis, more sort of lees heavy flavour, or are you going for more of a fresh, zippy English sparkling wine sort of vibe?
Probably both.
Okay.
I'm probably more of a traditionalist. I love champagne.
There's nothing wrong with champagne.
No, and certainly New Zealand makes great method traditional, so champagne method.
Have you brought that across as well? Do you think that kind of New Zealand sort of method?
Definitely. But I think for me, because again, sparkling is quite renowned, and I think because where we are up in Norfolk, it's not the ideal climate.
No.
So I think we get that kind of zippiness, we get that freshness. So I think we need a bit longer on these just to kind of balance out.
So how long do you age yours for normally? Because you've got 2021 and so 2021s.
So they're both 18 months. The current, but we only we take in stages. So the first batch was 18 months. The next allocation has been 24 months.
Okay, so do you do to demand then to a certain extent?
Pretty
so
much,
you just go,
So and then you get something slightly different every time you have it. But there's no parameters that are set by. So again, it's just kind of seeing
and
what
will you
it
alter
does.
that dosage with every sort of like one? Wonderful.
But we've actually kept it the same for the next batch of the 21s we've done. Purely because an extra 6 months is not a huge time, so you get a little bit more texture, but the acidity's still there, so we can still get away with 5 grams of dosage. So we kind of kept it the same. The next batch we might look at tweaking it, but again we'll just see that when the time comes. So there's no kind of.
And do you have that approach again, that minimal sort of intervention to a certain extent with your sparklings?
I mean, it was quite interesting with the 21s because I made the base wines. I try and make the base wines.
2021 as well is not the best vintage. It's a very, very difficult vintage. I know that Essex and all that area, because they were a lot drier, did a bit better, but it was flowering that was one of the major issues of 2021 in that there just wasn't very good flowering. It was very windy, it was very wet, so therefore there wasn't pollination, so you didn't end up with grapes to start with.
No.
And again, that's a regional sort of variation from place to place. But Essex wasn't too bad, I think.
We weren't too bad in Norfolk.
Or Norfolk, yeah, Norfolk, Essex.
If memory, it's going back a few years, but if memory serves, it wasn't too. There's been a few vintages since then. I've got my notes on my laptop. But yeah, it wasn't actually too bad for us. Again, I think because our vines were still young.
Yeah.
So if you had more established vines, they probably would have suffered, as ours have this year. But younger vines, the actual fruit set
Plus,
looks fine.
2020 was quite good. So you're always on the back of a good vintage.
Typically, yeah.
To like to have a bad thing.
Yeah.
The vine is like, I'm happy with this.
Yeah.
I quite like a year off, so I'm not going to bother.
So I basically made the base wines in 21, kept them in tank at Burn Valley, and actually kind of, because the acidity was quite sharp again, being a slightly more challenging growing season, they actually went through mallow on their own again.
Yeah.
Now, you can do mallow on your base wines. Some people do, some people don't.
Yeah.
But again, because the acidity was just a touch too high, that literally mallow doing on its own in the tank just actually kind of give a bit of softness, a bit of richness, and actually just gives nice structure to the wine.
Structure, roundness, and
something that wasn't planned, the wines were like, no, we're going to do it anyway, and it's actually worked out to be the benefit. And actually, when we sent it to basically Harpin or Halfpenny Green over in Birmingham, who did the secondary fermentation for us, they were like, oh, do you know your wines are still going through mallow? Because I sent them in Arlington's, and the bags were like bulging.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I did worry about that, but he said, oh, that's fine. It's actually, the wines actually taste quite nice, so the mallow's been a benefit. So again, just going with the flow sometimes actually just benefits.
Brilliant.
So obviously it can go the opposite, but wines will do, they're natural products, they're live products, so they'll do their own thing.
Well, thank you so much for taking me through the range. Honestly, I'm so excited. I love all the different grape varieties, and reds, sparklings and stills, covering the whole basis.
Yeah.
So what do you have to actually offer as well at Burn Valley? Can people come and visit you, or?
Yeah, so we do kind of tastings throughout the summer. So we have a marquee go up. We typically kind of do like a launch weekend and Easter weekend.
Yeah.
So we kind of launch some new wines. We do like a whole weekend. So next year we're kind of doing, I think Friday, Monday we're going to do like platters available to order.
Lovely.
There's just a small fee for people to come and taste. We normally have about 8 wines for people to try.
Wonderful.
So normally like £10 to try 8 wines. We normally do refund that for like, if you buy 6 bottles, you get your £10 back. If you buy like 12 bottles, we do like 10%. We're going to do like a seafood Saturday theme. We're going to do like barbecue Sundays.
Yeah.
So then we go into like proper tastings. So over the summer we do sit-down tastings that last 2 hours. We do them typically at 12 o'clock, Thursday, Friday, Sunday.
Does it help that you have someone working in catering?
Yeah, so we've got Steve. Yeah, so he does all the platters.
So Steve who works there, he does all the platters. So you've got someone in catering, so you're people are well catered for when they come and visit.
Steve worked in London, so he's a brilliant chef. But cellar door's always open, literally kind of 7 days a week. We do close for Sundays over the winter. Over harvest, mainly bottle sales, but we're obviously in harvest mode, so no real tastings.
Yeah.
But if you want to come help, there's always beer and wine available.
We do feed you.
So we do other events. So we always do a summer party, like a jazz party in August. So we get a local jazz band in. Steve does food again. There's obviously wines available. So we normally do that.
So just check out website for that.
Yeah, pretty much. Check out burnvalleyvineyard.co.uk or market.com. Whichever Laura's done.
So just check out Burn Valley Vineyard for details of all their events and
we're on
so forth.
Facebook and Instagram.
And to buy wine as well.
We ship nationwide.
So socials, Instagram.
Yeah.
You on TikTok yet?
I don't think so. We've got a social media guru who does all that.
We'll start TikTok.
I don't think we do TikTok. I don't think we do
or
Twitter.
I
don't think we do Twitter or X, whatever it is.
X.
So we do some social media. But yeah, it's
the website, social media, and then purchase the wines, come and visit you.
Pretty much.
Amazing. Wonderful. We should toast to that. Thank you so much for coming and chatting through all of the incredible wines that you have.
Thank you.
I look forward to trying them all.
Yeah. I've got an orange wine next year as well, hopefully.
You heard it first.
Red sparkling and orange wine. That's my two trials.
Red sparkling and orange wine coming
soon. That's my 2 trials this year. So
thank you so much, Matt. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Should we drink the rest of this now?
Yeah, sounds a good idea.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.